All right, we will call to order the regular meeting of the School Board of Eastern Carver County, June 18th, 2018. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everyone. We have an agenda tonight. We have a lot of actions, so we're going to be action-oriented, especially tonight. So let's dive into it. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Anderson and Ross. Any discussion on the agenda tonight? Okay, hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Okay, moving on, 2.0, communication recognition. We do have one speaker for the open forum, Dan Beck.
Nice name.
West Express. Mr. Bach, his children thankfully attend our schools. He would have probably benefited from that, at least.
I won't explain that I went to Catholic school and Catholic school English and math, but I'll refrain from that. Dan Bach, West Express, president of West Express. We are here, a number of our board members are here to thank the school board for the brand new pool at Pioneer Ridge Middle School. I'd like to thank former Superintendent Dr. Bach. Wish he was here, wish he would have been at the open house because he would have seen the smiles on the swimmers and parents. Clint, thank you for all your support, and the rest of the school board. Most of you were here over the past 5-6 years as we worked hard to get all the referendum passed, and I just want to say thank you for allowing us to be partners in getting the pool and the rest of the referendum passed. We were pleased on June 10th at the open house of the pool to present Dee Dee and Tim with a check for $12,500 as our initial down payment for our commitment of $50,000 for the scoreboard. So if you haven't seen that fired up yet, it is pretty cool, pretty amazing. We did receive a grant from Minnesota Swimming, which was $12,500. So that's what we presented as our initial down payment. And then we will spread the rest of that over 5 years. We got a payment plan with Dee Dee, and Dee Dee, thank you for working on finances and everything. But once again, on behalf of the West Express Board of Directors, as well as all the parents, and most importantly, the swimmers, thank you for the wonderful facility and the opportunity to work with you on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. And Dan is my neighbor. That's why I can poke fun at him. But I do want to say thank you to everyone for your help with that, the referendum, which provided, helped provide this pool, as well as a number of obviously very important amenities for our community and our educational mission here, so that we can do what this says up here. So thank you for all of that, because it takes a village, and you guys certainly did your fair share of work on that. So thank you for your support again, for the partnership. So, and last thing is let's swim fast in that thing, okay? All right, great, thank you. Okay, before we get to the consent agenda, we have a new addition to our valued staff here at Eastern Carver County. So, Dee Dee.
Thank you. I would like to introduce Kim Franta. Kim is a new food service director, school nutrition director. Kim previously was at New Prague Schools and has some past experience of managing a couple of bigger restaurants. So we welcome Kim. She started a week ago Monday, right? So just wanted to introduce her to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome, Kim. All right, thank you. All right, item 3.0 was a consent agenda. Again, as a reminder, board members, we've These have all had some discussions. Yes, bye, everyone. Have a great night.
See ya.
I'm sure if it were raining, you'd stick around, but since it's not, we'll think of you when we talk about that turn committee. All right, so it's just us cozy few and our wonderful viewing audience, so thank you all. So we have a consent agenda, a little more robust than usual, things we've all covered in the past. So with that, do I have a movement to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Berg and Logue. Any comments on this? We have, again, a number of things, including the bids, the MSHSL, XQ, and such. Okay, good. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Excellent, thank you. Okay, we will dive into a plethora of recommended actions. So, starting out 4.1, resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. Caroline.
That is me. So tonight I'm bringing you this resolution establishing the dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. We have 4 seats open this year. The filing period is from July 31st through August 14th, and those who are interested can file here at the district office, and it's a $2 filing fee.
How much is that filing fee?
$2.
$2. Inflation never hits that filing fee. It's $2.
It never does. Stays the same.
200 pennies. Excellent. Okay. Great. Okay, well, it is a resolution, so we will do a roll call.
Are there any questions?
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
can we ask questions?
We need a motion and
We need a motion, sorry, yes, I'm sorry. We need a
I
motion.
move. Second.
Okay, Ross Anderson. And questions?
So Caroline, what is the proper way to file for school board? Could you please explain the process to us in a little bit more detail?
Absolutely. So what you'll want to do is you'll come to the district office and we will have packets for board members, and they can take the packet with them. There's an affidavit in there that they need to fill out, and they need to have it notarized. It doesn't have to be notarized here, but it can. I am a notary, and we don't have any other notaries now. It's just me, I think. So I will notarize it unless I'm not here, but I should be. And then you just pay your $2 filing fee. And once we have that, we send that over to the county Carver office, and they have your name. And then you're going to be on the ballot. It's really a simple process.
All right, well, thank you for that further explanation.
It would take a real slow person to do it correctly, wouldn't it?
I almost messed it up. What are you saying, Fred?
No. But there is a lot of information that people need to know before they do decide to run for school board. There's a lot more to it than just board meetings, so.
Yes, hopefully that is the low bar, the low hurdle is filling out that form, and hopefully there's a lot more other consideration given. So, but thank you for that. Okay, so we have a motion, we've had discussion. So with that, then we will have a roll vote.
Yes. So when I call your last name, please answer with a yes or a no. We'll start with Colleran. Yes. Logue.
Yes.
Meyer. Oh, I'm sorry, he's not here. I didn't put AB next to his name. Sorry about that. Ross.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Berg.
Yes.
And Klein.
Yes.
And that motion passes, so thank you.
Great. Thank you. 4.2, facility rental rates. Ms. Didi.
Didi, you have a busy night tonight.
I know. I have the last few.
You
So
don't get a move for the next, all of them.
for the next, all of them.
Didi, you can have my water if you get.
I might take you up on it. Caroline always has some here for us. So, changes to the facility rental rates were reviewed at the 5/21/18 school board meeting. Just as a reminder, I know it was included in your packet, but rates have not increased in 10 years. Rates were adjusted based on comparison districts, looking at some of our comparison districts and those in our neighborhood. And then we would propose reviewing this like every 2 years and then updating as needed for that. So the board is asked to approve the facility rental rates that were provided in your packet and reviewed on May 21st.
Great, thank you. So with that, do we have a motion to approve these rates?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Rosenberg, thank you very much. Okay, discussion on, did have some discussion on this. So, any other further discussion?
I have a little bit of discussion. You know, I'm still struggling a little bit just with a couple items, like, for example, the difference between Category 2 rates and Category 4 rates. Because if you look at everything that isn't related to a pool or the athletic facility, 16 out of the 18 sites, there is a $50 or more difference between a Category 2 and a Category 4 entity, and then half of those 16, there's an over $100 difference between what a Category 2 and a Category 4 entity pays. And I'm just struggling with that because it seems to me either the Category 4 people are getting a really good deal because they're so close in cost to what a Category 2 group pays, or the Category 2 people are kind of getting the short end of the stick because these are associations that help to pass these referenda to get these facilities built, and then the fees that are paid to these associations by the families who are the taxpayers who voted for it and are paying for it in taxes. And then when our fees are so close to what people who had nothing to do with it are, I just feel like the disparity is almost, it's just unconscionable that we are not, that there's more of a disparity between the two, especially when you look at the other facilities and the difference in the cost of 2 versus 4.
Sure. So again,
Can I ask just to step back a little bit and clarify, because it's not on this document, it was in the previous meeting, but what the Category 2, 3, and 4 are?
Yep. So Category 2 is a not-for-profit organization that's headquartered in our district. Category 3 is a not-for-profit with headquarters outside of our district. And Category 4 is a for-profit organization. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep. And Category 1, which isn't on here, is school district organization, so our own usage of it.
And I mean, I understand, I'm sure you did, the research into what are the fair rates, and I don't know if that's just what everyone charges, but it just doesn't seem right to me that there's just, especially when there is such a big difference in some of those other categories, why these facilities, why it's so narrow of a difference.
Yeah, so it did go back to looking at what is being charged in the other comparable districts and how those rates are set. I do understand what you're saying, Amy, that some of those categories might be on the low end on the Category 4. I have to tell you, we don't have a lot of for-profit organizations that rent from us. So, for instance, in the pool, if you're looking at that particular one, we don't have for-profit groups that come in, and generally all of our time is gobbled up by our own organizations. But, there are some categories, auditorium, where it is significantly higher for our for-profit and they do use our organizations, our theaters and auditoriums. So these are not extremely different in some of our categories than what we've had in the past. Certainly we can go back and look again and maybe come back with some more methodology on how those rates are arrived for the future year, or you can leave the rates as they currently are in the previous years or where we're at right now. That's up to the board's discretion.
Dee Dee, remind me real quick, because there's also, so you got the fee structure, but you also have a preference, right? Of selection
Yes, we do.
or how that's weighted. Can you just go over
Yep.
that real quick?
It's the same order of the number. So Category 1 is a school district or community education program, has first priority. Second priority is Level 2, which is our not-for-profit organizations within the district. Category 3, not-for-profit with headquarters outside of our district. And then Category 4 is our for-profit organizations.
So Category 4 can only reserve this space if 2 and 3 have no interest in those dates.
Correct. That's correct.
So I think, Amy, I get your point as well. If it was all an even slate, that anybody could get that, but I think at least for me personally, in light of that it's already weighted average in terms of preference, that helps get me there, at least personally, from that fact.
Well, and then let's go back a little bit, because I see what you're saying as far as especially with the dome, it is, or the Eastern Carver County Athletic Facility. But these are similar to other
Facilities.
other facilities outside of our district. So
That's right.
these organizations would be paying these
Right.
similar rates. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. I see that. Yeah.
Well, I'm still also a little troubled with the difference between the pool and the dome, and I know you said it's a the market-driven kind of thing, but it shocks me that you could swim in the entire pool facility for over 6 hours for what it would cost to rent the dome for 1 hour. And
I understand.
I just that is shocking to me, because the pool really is the most expensive thing that we have, and I know you said that doesn't factor into it, but
Right.
that is just shocking to me.
It's too bad we didn't have this conversation before.
I know, and I don't mean
No.
no disrespect to any of the
No.
athletic groups in any way, but it's just that I've not done the research on what pools versus domes cost, but it
Right.
just is shocking to me
Yeah.
that there's that huge of a
Sure.
difference between those fees as well.
Yep, and keep in mind that the dome, or the athletic center, can be divided into 3 different groups. It's a lot larger facility. There's more groups that would rent that facility versus a pool. You're limited really in the new pool, the swimming pool, the lap pool, and the diving pool. So it's not as much demand and need for it in that as whereas the pool the athletic center, there's many more groups that put that demand on it. So I understand what you're saying. But when I said it's too bad we didn't talk about this earlier, because it was a huge jump for West Express for us to even go to this, and the different rates for the lap pool versus the diving well, that was big to their budget. So
And I don't think that it was an appropriate discussion with them here. Their support, and they're supporting it in multiple ways, and they're paying market rates. I don't think that's. I understand your point. It is just the reality, though. I think this the market factors here are such that there's just many more groups that are demand dome time, and that's why turf time is up.
Yep.
So until there's, maybe we get more swimmers out there and they can bid those rates up, that'd be great. But I am empathetic to, especially when it comes to, number 3, category 3. It just, to me, does strike me as a little bit, it's not even a 10% difference, right? It's $25. I would, I guess, I don't know at this point if we're nitpicking here, but, if I had my druthers, I'd like to see that more in the middle. I am, somewhat mollified by, the bigger concern that I have and that I hear from the community is there's a community organization that wanted to have access to the facility, and there's another community nonprofit, but another community group in there. I did get some feedback on that. I don't know how that happened. I'm presuming there's a lot of learning going on this year. I just that's the number one thing to just. I don't want that to happen. I don't ever want people to say we didn't have fair access, but quite frankly, I do think there should be a bigger premium for outside of the community groups, because it just does seem disparate and just inappropriate. Maybe because we're I'm kind of with Amy. I'm kind of a dome person, and I get more feedback on that than I do on rates for the theater and such like that. But that's, I think, what I'd like to see, that at least be $50 more. Maybe it's $450, $455 for that category 3. That would be my only nit.
But let's go back to the process, though, because it was my understanding that when you rent, right, school district gets first, right, and then in our community, so our own soccer association would get first pick over outside.
Right.
Other.
And that's
soccer.
fine, but, but still, why not extract a little bit more revenue, right?
From our
From the
outside
outside community, if they, I don't think, at the end of the day, it's not big dollars, but I think it does, I think it should be at least a 10% difference between what we're charging outside communities.
The only thing I will, and we certainly can look at that, maybe I can bring back at another meeting or before we have that, another increase or proposal for an increase is bring back who is using our facilities and what are the groups. But I do know that we can outprice ourselves and then not be in the running to even get in. And the athletic center is a prime example, because I even know the rates that we have for our level 2 is higher than what they might pay at some of the other facilities in neighboring districts. So if we raise our level 3 and we have open slots, we're giving up also some revenue to help offset the costs. So I do understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure too that we're not outside of what's the market is for facility rental rates, and that we're just having an idle facility.
Why don't we do this? I recommend that we move forward, but given that this is a new facility, I'd like, maybe we reserve the right to look at the dome next year and to see who's using it. And, because the other ones are less, they're more established facilities. And I think with the pool, we can look at that. So maybe, in a year, we revisit the new facilities to see how those rentals are proceeding, who's using them, and we can incorporate that. And then after that, we can get on a 2-year cycle. But I think given that we're still new to this, I think a 2 year is probably a little bit too long to wait.
Sure. We absolutely could do that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to, let's open it up. Let's see how things go for the first year. Because when we do have a new facility, having a price that is higher than other facilities for a facility that nobody's going to use before does make me a little bit nervous. So I would rather have a lower price right now, see who uses it, then let's come back in a year. So,
We certainly could do that.
Okay.
see what happens.
Thank you, Amy. All right. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of, again, with the modification that we'll revisit this in a year, all in favor of the facility rental rates, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. Motion approved. And now we'll move on to 4.3, school district census.
Okay, the census for the school district, it was reviewed at the June 4th meeting. The changes in the residents that live within our community impacts the community service levy. This must be adopted. Any changes to that and the estimate must be adopted by July 1st. We got our census numbers from Davis Demographics, who you heard from last work session. And they estimate our census to be at 58,817. That's up from 56,000 in previous years. So included for you, if you accept the figures as provided by Davis Demographics, a resolution is included for your authorization.
Great. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Logue and Ross. Okay, discussion on this very interesting topic. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the video, but certainly a lot of data to digest. Questions, comments? Fred, I know you got a bunch of notes ready over there.
Yeah, they're pertaining to something else. But thank you.
Oh, thank you for being my comedic foil. Okay, so having no discussion, I know there was a fair amount before. We will put it to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Okay.
Moving right along, budget revisions.
Okay, at the last work session, we brought forward a 2017-18 budget revision. This is really just a reclass of budget for our long-term facility maintenance, moving it from the construction account to the general fund based on more information that we have from the Department of Ed. So the board is asked to approve the 2017-18 budget revision as proposed in the documents.
Great, thank you. Okay, asking for another motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anderson and Logue. All right, board members, doesn't get much easier than this unless you want to debate accounting definitions. So, are we good with this one?
Yes.
Okay, let's put it to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Excellent. Thank you, Dee Dee. And we're moving along. 4.5, general fund budget.
Okay. Well, as promised, last work session, we noted that we would come forward with the entire budget for the whole district. So as a reminder, in March, you adopted the capital-related budgets. In May, all other budget funds were described that include community service, food service, debt service, fiduciary, and internal service. Tonight, Pam will wrap it all together and summarize the 2018-19 budget. You'll notice that your budget book that's included, the 300-plus page document, yeah, Pam's proud, and she should be. It was a lot of work to get it there.
429, Dee Dee.
429?
Well, that's
Really?
the total amount of pages.
Ah, all right. Well, there's a lot of pages.
I think there's only 320.
Well, regardless, and
Unless it's growing on its own.
Pam and her team will submit that for the second year for the Meritorious Budget Award. Once they have a reviewer go in and review it, then they give us comments. So I know Pam and her team has addressed all of those. But without further ado, we will move to the presentation. It's kind of slow here, so I'll turn it over to Pam.
All right. Thank you. Let's start with revenue. We have a 3-year summary of revenue by fund. So we're showing our last year's actual numbers, our current year budget, and then our next year's budget. We've gone through all of these numbers, as Dee Dee said in previous meetings. None of the numbers have changed, so we haven't had any legislative updates or anything, or any corrections since previous meetings. So overall, in all of our funds, we're projecting $165 million in revenue for next year. That's up $3.7 million from current year, or 2.3%. A couple of things to note. General fund, as we went through before, goes up a little over 3%. Community ed is up 5%, almost 6%. That's mostly because of child care in the preschool program. Our internal service revenue goes down, and that's because our health insurance rates improved, so we're bringing in less premiums. And then note, for the second year in a row, we don't have any debt service for OPEB, and that's because we've already paid off those bonds. Next, on to expenses. Okay. Again, it's a 3-year summary. Last year's actual, our current year budget, and next year's. We're going to have over $170 million in expenses. That's down almost $16 million over this year, mostly due to construction. Those big construction projects are mostly complete. We just have punch list and commissioning things going on there. Another food service has a big jump, almost 11%, and that's due to that $500,000 chargeback that we're having for their excess food service fund balance for 3 years in a row. Then I'm going to move on to a fund balance summary. So this is the result of this first column here in 17-18 is what we expect or anticipate our fund balance to be by fund. 37 million, and then taking our revenue budget for next year and our expenditure budget, overall 31 million for all of our funds together. General fund, as we went through last time, goes down about almost $1.6 million. Food service down 480, again, 480,000 due to that chargeback. And then construction is down by 3.3 million. The next slide is the exact slide that we went over a couple weeks ago on the general fund, and this has 3 years of history. So 2 years of actuals, our current year, budgeted year, and then next year. And again, it's just by the different categories: assigned, unassigned, non-spendable, and restricted. And really, it's just to show you with our cost containment measures in the general fund for next year, we're able to maintain or achieve a over 8% fund balance, or 8.38 of our unassigned fund balance of percentage of expenditures. Next, we have a 5-year plan by fund. So this is revenue we're looking at right now. So we have our current year budget next year, and then we forecasted out 3 years using just some basic assumptions and changes that we anticipate by fund. So you can see we're going from current year of $161 million up to $173 million over the next 5 years. Maybe just one thing to note on the OPEB debt service, we still have a fund balance. We will anticipate that will be a levy reduction. We thought that it might happen this next year, but it looks like it'll be the following year. Then I'm going to move on quickly to the 5-year plan for expenses. Again, current year budget, next year, and then 3 years forecasted, using some of those same assumptions and changes for each year. Then I'm going to move on to the 5-year plan for the fund balance. So taking both those revenues and expenditures from each year, we're looking at total fund balance of this year at 37 million, moving it down to 15 million by 2022. Really, this just illustrates the need for further cost containment measures in the general fund in the next couple of years. And with that, that's what I have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So we need a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Anderson and Ross. All right, great. So, again, thank you, Pam, Dee Dee, team. Tremendous work. So, I know we had some fair amount of discussion before, but I know it's a lot of material, and maybe some of you had some time to go through it and have some follow-up questions. So, any other questions for Dee Dee and Pam?
Yeah, I think you guys just want to echo that you guys do a great job with this, and it's just very read through a page, and it's where people should go. Tim, as you always mention, that if anyone has questions, this is the document they should be reading, and
Yep.
you guys do a great job of presenting
Every
this.
metric, everything you want to know, by
Thank you.
fund, by building, it's amazing. And the forecast.
Yeah, it's really a summary of the work that we do for the entire year almost. And it's, that's a very exciting fact. I know it's a lot of pages. But it would be nice to have that document available, and maybe it's just because we did the school board election is up, but have that document as a reference for any potential school board candidates. Because it's a great summary of
It will
what we
be,
do.
once you approve it, it'll be on the finance webpage, and all of our previous budgets and as well as our audit reports are all on the finance webpage. So it'd be a great we can do a link or whatever you'd like
Yeah, it
to,
would be nice
to get
to
it to
have a
them.
link
Yeah.
there. And it's also just a testament to how much transparency that we really have with our board meetings, our budget, and what a great job you do. Yeah, you do good work, and Pam, you should be proud of that document, and Dee Dee, but you should be proud of it. So show it off. Show it one more time. Yay!
No, and I'd just like to echo that. Excuse me. Looking through that, it's so nicely done and laid out in logical manner. I think anyone in the district, it's a great tool to look at and wonder where that is. But the other nice thing about the summary here is it certainly still highlights while we're in a district that continues to grow, we see enrollment, we still have financial challenges, right? From the standpoint, if we look at our general fund, where we need to be, and future conversations on how we maintain that to the level that we want to through cost containment and other things that, we do as a board continue to have to look at this because you can see over time the economics still don't line up. So.
Yes.
No, they don't.
Other thoughts? I mean, Jeff, kind of stole my thunder. I mean, you.
Sorry,
That's all right. That's all right. Just to underscore, I think that you look at the projections of our expenditures, and we made an important and necessary commitment to our teachers, but that's our biggest expense, and people are our biggest expense, and if you look at the main reason the fund balance is declining is because we need to pay our teachers, and obviously all the other staff. So, but it does, that's going to be our challenge, as we all know, to continue to monitor that and make some choices. But that's what, that's why we pay those $2 and fill out that form.
I know, right?
Right?
Exactly.
For that opportunity. So, but I do want to say from, kind of the mundane things like going to landscape over portrait, bravo. Bravo. It's a little thing, but I do think it's laid out. It's a little more easier to digest. It seemed dense, less dense and kind of easier, a little more, jovial to flip through. I'm sure other board members can, corroborate that observation. But,
It's easier to go through.
but again, just the details, it's all there. I always tell people, like, you want to know what's going on? It's right there. And so I've actually had a couple conversations at Caribou where I pull it up and say, let's talk about it. Here you go. And I use the document. So keep up the good work, and we'll continue to wrestle to find out where to get and place these nickels. So anything else? Mr. Meyer, thanks for doing double duty. No, that's all right. Scrambled to get here.
Yeah.
So with that, let's bring it to a vote and let Pam go fight some other battles here. So all in favor of the 2017-18 budget revisions as proposed, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay. Great.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pam.
I'm sorry, that was the general fund. I mixed up. Sorry, general fund budget. So now, speaking of details, the long-term facility maintenance plan. Boy, there's a lot of details in that one, too.
Yes. Yes, they are. And
Roofs are expensive.
pardon me, roofs
Thought you
are
were-
very
I'm
expensive.
going to steal your thunder. Roofs
That's
are
okay.
expensive.
They are. They are.
So,
So, as you recall, at the June 4th work session, we reviewed the district's 10-year long-term facility plan. Since you saw that, we have not made any changes to the documents. And as a reminder, the district receives between $2.4 million to $3.4 million, depending on the year. And as you know, as Tim mentioned, there's a lot of roofs, and some of the information included in there shows how much we're spending on roofs, how much we're spending on mechanical, and then as well there's a chart in there that shows how much by school building, and you can see some of our older buildings have a little more work and TLC being done. But with that, we ask the board to approve the district's 10-year plan. That needs a requirement that needs to occur before the end of July.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Fred. Second?
Second.
Good. Berg and Logue. All right. Questions, comments about the old LTFM? Not to be confused with the TTFN.
I just have one question about so asbestos abatement is at middle school east and west. Are those the last schools that have asbestos in them? Because I feel like we've seen asbestos like over and over and over.
Well, I can't
They've got to be one of the last two, right?
I can't guarantee. I mean, anytime we start removing flooring or
no,
ceiling
like
tiles.
known, but
Additional-
known.
known asbestos.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. I'd have to talk with Mick to make sure on that, but yeah.
Other questions, board members?
This just always reminds me of, when I go through my house and think of all the things things you have to do to keep it running and things you'd like to do to keep it running. These are the have-tos.
That's correct.
These are we put a lot of money into these buildings.
Right.
And more importantly, our precious cargo of all of our kids are in these buildings.
Right.
So we really need to keep them safe places for them, and it costs money.
Right. And we're very fortunate. I mean, all Minnesota school districts now have this access to this funding, which is great. We had access to it once, as I mentioned. We built Chanhassen High School and got over 2 million square feet. But some of the small school districts in the state didn't have that luxury, and to just rely on your operating capital is not enough funding. So this is a great source of funding, and we're using some of this to pay off those bonds that we sold when I first started in 2010, I think, for the alt facilities. So between the alt facilities and this funding, we're chipping away at it. And then we did about $7.5 million with the bond referenda. So, but there's more to do.
More to do, and part of that is because we did not have access to these funds until
Correct.
2010.
Correct.
So all those years, and we didn't have that. So
Right. Yep.
things got a little behind.
Yep. That's right.
Other questions? Okay, I have one. Chanhassen High School. Although a newer facility, I took note of the facility maintenance was comparable to older buildings.
Which are you on a particular page or just looking at the total?
Well, there's multiple pages relevant, but you start out with, I guess there's no page number of the document, but it's the 10-year plan by building.
Yeah.
And you'll see, it's 1.9, call it, right? So, comparable to Bluff Creek and Chaska High School and more than and other older buildings. So I was just curious. I looked at the detail. There's some. It refers to hard surface stuff.
Hardscape.
So is that just we need to read? I'm just curious if there's, and we can follow up. But I mean, what is?
So that's going to be things like pavement, concrete sidewalks, things that need to be repaired. By the time, this really sounds sad, but by the time we get close to the end of this, Chan High School will be 20 years old. Right, because it was built in 2009 or opened in the fall of 2009. So as you go through and you start to do some replacement of things that need to be addressed, we've got it in the plan.
Okay.
Will it fall out exactly like this? Not necessarily. But, things like carpeting and flooring and painting and some of the concrete and pavement will need to be reviewed and maintained.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Possibly roofs.
Yeah, it is a 10-year plan, so
Right.
Was, and that's kind of what I figured it was, but I couldn't extract that from the document, so I just wanted to be sure that clarify that the bituminous and concrete expenses were sort of back-end loaded at least. So, okay. All right. Any other facility maintenance questions? All right. So hearing none, we'll bring this one to a vote. All in favor of the long-term facilities maintenance 10-year plan, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, we have a
Thank you.
new 10-year plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, don't go anywhere.
I know.
Southwest Metro Intermediate Long-Term Facility Maintenance 10-year plan.
Okay. As a member of the Southwest Metro Intermediate School District, a portion of their long-term facility maintenance plan is attributed to our community. The total of their plan for that upcoming school year, the 2019-2020 school year, is $250,000, with our portion at Eastern Carver County of $63,774.40. And that will be included in the levy process that you go through starting this summer. Included in your packet is a resolution, so they need each school district to pass a resolution for their portion of that. And you have that included, and the board is asked to approve that resolution tonight.
Great. Okay, it's motion time. Who's moving?
So moved.
Thank you. Logue and Ross. I think I got there. Thank you. All right. Discussion on this much smaller facilities maintenance plan.
Well, and they're much smaller. They only have one building,
Correct.
so.
Not
they
saying
do-
less
and-
important.
and-
I'm just saying the
They,
numbers.
they have multiple buildings.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
They do. Their need is actually greater than this. It is more than 250. They did have a study done as well. But they got a lot of pressure from all the communities who are all going out for referendums to maintain and keep this to a smaller amount. So you'll see this amount, the 250, start to kind of gradually get a little bit larger over time. But right now it's at 250. So I don't remember what their total plan was that they looked at.
So when would be the next check-in on this? I mean,
Every year.
Every year. we're gonna-
Every year, just like ours.
Okay.
Yep, same as ours.
So, yeah.
And the percentage allocation is just based on usage, or what is that?
It is.
regularly
It's
too?
based on our usage of, boy, I should have wrote that down. I apologize. But I know part of it is the vocational, and that's why ours is up a little more. It is up more than it was the previous year. That was just an error that hadn't been included in their calculations previously. So, but we're a pretty big user of their vocational programs.
And they're good programs.
Right.
They are great programs. Yeah, us and Shakopee, and I would imagine partially because those are the largest districts, the closest in
Right.
proximity.
Yep.
And yeah, these other districts are much smaller
Right. Or further away.
or further.
Like
yeah.
Buffalo just recently joined, and
Yeah, they are.
probably don't send too many to our vocational programs. So
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Any other questions? All right, Caroline's going to run the roll.
Once again, when I call your name, please answer with a yes or a no. We're going to start with Logue.
Yes.
Meyer.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Berg.
Yes.
Colleran.
Yes.
And Klein.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you.
thank you.
All right. And bringing her long set on the podium to a conclusion is
Here we
Dee
go.
Dee and lead in the water plan, not to be confused with the old lead in
Right.
the water plan.
Right. So the lead and water plan was reviewed. Mick Greiner was here at the June 4th meeting and reviewed that. As a reminder, it was developed with consultants and review with other school district plans. The document has been no changes made to the document as presented before, and the board is asked to approve the plan. We need to have the plan approved by July 1st.
Okay. Great. All right. So do we have another? This is the last one. So see who gets this one. We have another motion.
So moved.
Second.
Meyer and Colleran, thank you very much. All right, discussion on lead in water. It's a bad combination.
It is. Let's get rid of it.
And it's good that we have a plan.
Yeah.
It's glad we don't have
That's
a
right.
problem to keep it. We don't have a problem. But yeah, we had a pretty good report on that. Any other thoughts or questions after the time to reflect? No? Awesome. All right. We will bring this one to a vote then. All in favor of the lead in water plan as proposed, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Awesome. Dee Dee, well
Thank
done.
you.
Take a bow. Okay, that ends our actions, and so now we will go to some reports. David Brecht, please regale us with what's going on with the open enrollment in Eastern Carver counties.
Board. Brief report for you. Open enrollment, referred to in the state of Minnesota as the Enrollment Options Act. We generally refer to it as open enrollment. So coming to you with a brief report tonight, in the description kind of outlined it, with a recommendation that the board close one of our programs, Steps Towards Adult Responsibility, also known as the STAR program, to actually limit its enrollment to a cap of 35, which we have not reached yet, but your authorization would allow us to continue to monitor that, and if we hit that, stop any open enrollment from adding additional students into that program. Additionally, there was an attachment, so in previous years, we have simply taken a look at a variety of numbers across the district. So the statute is listed there, and there are two basic reasons a board can limit enrollment. 1% of the total enrollment at each grade of the district being open enrollment. We can establish that and say, yes, we've met that criteria, then establish our own criteria based on program size, building size, class size. So we looked at a variety of those, but believe all of our other programs, grade levels, courses can handle in a healthy way any open enrollment that we would foresee into the fall. Only ask that you make a recommendation for us to monitor and cap our STAR program at this point, but we will always continue to monitor all of our grades and programs, and if we notice any issues or believe there's any concern, we would certainly come back with any additional recommendations or requests on the from the board. With that, if there are any questions, I can certainly attempt to answer them for you.
So, at any time, can we shut the door? Do we have to have a resolution or anything from the board or some official edict, or can we just say, we're there now, no more? What's the process?
According to the statute in the enrollment options, it requires a board resolution to close to open enrollment. So what we would do in the Welcome Center is families would continue to fill out open enrollment documentation. We do ask, and it's on the state form, what is your first, second, and third preference into the district? And if we got to a place where we were concerned about adding any additional students, I would hold all of those enrollments, come to the board for a recommendation, after which point, with your recommendation, we could cap it. And then our communication to families would be, that first choice of yours is now closed. We will offer you open enrollment to the district, and your second choice is where we would place you. So that process we manage through the Welcome Center as open enrollments come to the district.
Are the numbers that are applying to open enroll into District 112 fairly consistent? And the reasons that they want to do that, are those fairly consistent as well?
I haven't looked at that closely, Fred, but I believe fairly consistent, and we'll be working on our capture report, which also includes information about open enrollment students into our district, I believe for our July board meeting. So I believe, yes, relatively consistent over time. They don't provide much of a detailed explanation as to why they're open enrolling to the district, however.
It would be good for people to know that it's not just a wide open, here are the doors, come flooding in, because I'm concerned a little bit about a mixed message, that we're looking ahead, thinking that we are going to need maybe some more construction not too far down the line, and we're looking at the classes filling.
Yep.
And I'm concerned that people are going to start asking, well, why are you letting folks from other districts come, and we're paying for it?
Correct. So, for example, based on the demographics report, we know that 40% of our development growth might be in the Carver boundary area and 33% in the Victoria area. So I think part of the reason for running this entire report, not just talking about STAR, is to give you a heads up that yes, we do monitor. And if you noted in the report, what we did was we looked at October 1 of 16 to October 1 of 17, because generally open enrollment deadlines have been January 15th in the past. So we've been getting ahead of the January 15th decision-making around open enrollment. But as a desegregation district, we continue to accept students on a non-resident basis all the way through. So we've just been monitoring. We didn't come to you before the January 15th deadline. We will continue to do that. And I think now with our demographics report, anticipating where development will be, I've had that conversation with Clint already. We may need to say at Carver Elementary School, for example, we're just not going to be open to open enrollment anymore because we anticipate so much development. And once admitted through open enrollment, they are our students unless they choose to leave. So if they would come in first grade, we're serving those students all the way through their educational career. So to your point, Fred, yes, we want to continue to monitor that, the enrollment in all of our buildings, correlate that or cross-reference that with our demographics report and where we anticipate growth, and certainly be ready to close buildings to open enrollment if we believe that's prudent for us.
And we have done that in the past.
We have done that.
And
We've done that with
lots of
Chanhassen High
elementary
School in the past.
Yes.
We've done that with elementary schools in the past. Yes.
Yeah.
With our recent build addition, we're in pretty good place right now, but to your point, we need to monitor moving into the future.
And some of that's happening now in the buildings, just on a class and grade level basis. So, you know, at Carver, if they've got a lot of fourth grade students and we have somebody that's open enrolled, requested Carver as their first choice, you know, June Johnson will look at that and say, you know, we don't have that, then they would have the option of those other choices, should there be availability. But we've got enough buffer in different buildings, depending on the grade level, that there are still some options. We haven't had to shut down a whole building. It's also the advantage of having that software here that we can leverage, because we can continue to kind of real-time update where we're at and how those projections impact kind of where we're going.
So what you just said, we're denying people within their schools that they choose based on per grade, but we're not closing down the whole school. Is that what you're saying we're doing right now?
Right now, if we will give them options, so they'll give, you know, up to 3 options when they fill out the open enrollment. So depending on the building, if they have, you know, if you want second grade at Bluff Creek and that is kind of at a max, you know, again, that's where the principal can look at that and say no, and we would look at those other 2 options that they've selected and look at in the enrollment there and come back to them with, here are some other options for you. So it may not always be their very first choice.
And actually, it is refreshing. I mean, we spent many years closing to open enrollment in multiple schools, grades in multiple schools, entire elementary schools. So, I mean, it is kind of refreshing to see that we're just monitoring the STAR program now. Well, and it should be that way. We just built a new elementary school, and we moved kids around. So, yay. This is good news.
And this in particular, I think, speaks to the strength of our STAR program. Not only are we serving our own students in a transitional capacity, but Laura PK, who oversees and monitors the program, anticipates others potentially looking at our programs. But we want to be prudent about that and make sure we can serve our own students, not get over the capacity of the building or our staffing and budgetary limitations as well.
So that 35 figure, I assume if we get to that place, we close it, there's still enough flexibility where if we have students that do move into the district that
Correct.
want to join that program, we would still have the space for them.
Yes, all we're talking about with this recommendation is closing to open enrollment. We would continue to serve our own students if we had students.
Does sibling preference or sibling kind of grandfathering work? I mean, if you open enroll to some school and then it closes, if you have a younger sibling, does that student still get to come? Or, I mean, if it's closed, it's closed.
Yeah, what the statute talks about is like getting into lotteries, almost like we do with internal transferring. And we as a board, can then set up criteria for something like that. So splitting a family is something we usually don't want to do with internal transfers. I don't know that we would want to do it with open enrollments either.
Right.
So maybe that becomes an exception or an accommodation that we would make to families while we close to new open enrollments or new families to a particular building or grade level.
Right, yeah.
So I do think the statute provides the board or administration with the board to make particular recommendations and kind of manage that as we see most appropriate. Other questions?
Do you know a rough percentage of the STAR program right now? What percentage is out of district?
Is out of district?
Just roughly. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
I want to say the current school year, 17-18 enrollment was 31, and 2 of those students were out of district.
Okay.
So the 7 to 8%, I think 2 out of 31 would be approximately.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any board members, anything else? Okay, so I presume this is going to come back on the next agenda as a resolution.
Correct.
An action item.
An action item, which will be a resolution. Yep. Okay. Great. Well, good discussion, and thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. We'll keep you appraised of any other updates.
Appreciate it. Okay, it's time for the Chris and Amy show, the Turn Committee update.
And as they're coming up, I'll just kick this off. And this has been some work that's been happening over the last couple of years here. And I think they're going to go a little more into the background on this. But the reality is we have a contract with our teacher group that's decades old. And the role of what's happening with the teacher in the classroom and just the changes in instruction as we are moving forward with personalized learning obviously are significant. And so it's really starting this conversation about how do we, look at things differently. And the thing with that contract is it provides some stability for teachers, but also for the district. And so in some of our Turn Committee meetings, I think, we both will, say that we need to make some changes here. But in some respects, we're both holding on to it saying, you let go first. And so this is really an opportunity to kind of in an informal, very collaborative environment start talking about what are the barriers to what we're trying to accomplish now and how can we start working in the right direction. Not that we're going to turn this thing around overnight, no pun intended, but how can we start making actionable steps and moving in the right direction? And it ties into a lot of our conversations that we have in negotiations, and some of those MOUs and areas of study, we move into that Turn group to have those conversations. So I'll let them talk a little more in detail, but again, I think it's been really valuable work for us and a good model of some of those conversations that really should be happening across the state.
Well, good evening. Chris Commerce and I are here to give you really an overview of the work that Clint mentioned has been going on over the last 2 years. I know we briefly talked about some of our work when we came before you in May and talked about the elementary assessment days. That's a great example of the kind of collaboration that this team has been working on, and that really helps us move our district forward. So tonight, we're excited to tell you more about our work.
Good evening, board members. Yes, I think just to pick up where Clint left off, we got started in the fall of 2016. Education Minnesota invited our local, the Chaska Education Association and Eastern Carver County Schools to send some representatives down to Downers Grove, Illinois, just outside Chicago. And we went for a 2 or 3 day conference to really be introduced into work that's been going on since the 1980s. I gave you a little link here to the work of Patrick Dolan, and sadly he passed away in the last year, but he has been doing research on his own and then in collaboration with Rutgers University. They have a program there studying management and labor relations. And there's just an amazing amount of data that shows when adults collaborate, kids do better. And it really shouldn't be something that we need to prove, but we have the proof. So we had to come up with a project, and we went to this conference, and the idea was, well, what are you working on? What could you be supported by the Turn Conference, the Teacher Union Reform Network? And so Dr. Bauk and I were talking about, well, what if we talked about possibilities of how conditions for teachers could be thought about the same way that we think about conditions for learning for students. And that kind of got us talking, and later in this presentation we'll give you some more details on what we came up with. Yeah, so.
So the main purpose really was to start and support a conversation between the Chaska Education Association and the school district. And it really was meant to lay the groundwork prior to negotiations to be able to help move us forward. One of the main goals was that belief in teacher agency and the impact that teachers, when they have more independence and opportunities, really are able to better foster the kind of agency we're trying to create in our learners each day in the classroom and through the school. So our local group really focused on the implications for the Teachers' Day, and they had a big picture question. It was, what are steps to move from where we are now to a teacher day that aligns with our beliefs around personalized learning, meeting people where they are, as well as meeting individual needs, not a one-size-fits-all approach, our work around McCrell, and continuing to grow and develop our teachers so that they can grow and develop our learners, our personalized learning star and the elements that we've really elevated, and then how do we attract the best teachers, and how do we keep those teachers here in our district, in a way that helps them to be productive. Ultimately, again, all of the work really focusing on how can we better meet the needs of our learners or our students.
So we just want to kind of illustrate who is doing this work. And you can see between the first year, 16-17, and this year, 17-18, there is a lot of continuity in the group. And we really do have teachers representing equitably different levels, elementary and secondary, and then principals and district staff. So we're really kind of trying to, again, show here a broad group of representation. You can see the asterisk folks. Those are they who went down to Downers Grove.
I think one of the other important things to note about this group is when people are asked to be on a committee and they choose to continue, it usually shows that there's value in the work that's happening and they believe the work is making a difference. And you can see there's a great deal of continuity, as Chris mentioned.
So as we've already alluded, the first effort here was to begin to talk about our big question. What are the structures that currently exist that inhibit our success? And I think this is something that we're kind of talking about as a nation and as the state of Minnesota, but we're really I think asking those questions more frequently, and maybe they're more substantive because of personalized learning, and really thinking about how we're shifting our work and how the structures of an industrial model can inhibit that work. What we see, nationally and sometimes statewide is sort of an adversarial approach to that. We've got to make change. How do we discuss that in an adversarial way? And I think this is really presenting us with an opportunity to do it collaboratively, and I think we're getting results. We have a lot of small wins right now, which is really good. And that's what we need. That's what we expected. And I think that is yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. If you look at 2016-17, we had a big change with our professional learning communities. The rest of the state was working, we were counting minutes, and if we think about students, we all agree that, we shouldn't count seat time. That shouldn't be the measure. We talk about time as a variable. Achievement is the constant. And so as we looked at PLCs, how can we do this? How can we make this work more authentic? How can we take the seat time element off? We also, in that following summer, were thinking about ways to engage teachers over the summer. The Summer Academy and our PL Summit, and specifically with the PL Summit, there was an opportunity to trade. If I was at the summit, then I could swap that for a day at the beginning of the school year in the workshop week. And then finally, we got into some substantive, didn't have a lot of results in 16-17, thinking about conferences. And really, if you think about it, and Clint alluded to it, a lot of our contractual agreements were state-of-the-art in the 1980s. So if we think about parent-teacher conferences, you really think for a moment about with email, with our grading tools, with our communications, the life of a teacher and conversely the life of a parent or the family is really changed with regards to, we're not just relying on the parent-teacher conference or a phone call. And then we got into this year.
So this year we continued that conversation around conferences. And we really wanted to talk about what was meaningful engagement. How do we provide parents with what they need and the information that they want to engage with their child's teachers? As Chris mentioned, with the move toward technology, with teachers entering information, teachers or parents now have the ability to see on a day-to-day basis, how did my learner do on a specific task or a specific learning target, power standard, or maybe in a course. So we really started talking about that relational aspect and some of the nuances or differences from an elementary learner to a middle level and finally to a high school learner, and what might meet different levels' needs. So we settled on focusing on 16 hours of face-to-face conferences where we're having opportunities to talk one-on-one with parents about their learners' growth and development. How are they progressing both academically, socially, emotionally, and with those life skills that we all value so much that we know matter in a student's success beyond our schools. And then we also had further conversations about those other 8 hours of family engagement. And we really decided that each building should identify or develop their own engagement plan. What was meaningful to them? We have back to school nights, we have curriculum nights, but we also value different opportunities, whether it's history day at the middle level or graduation or whatever the case might be. What are those other things that are valued? And buildings will be identifying their own priorities. We also talked about grading days, and we talked about providing some flexibility. Again, teachers are accessing their information via their computer, via web-based applications. And so this next year, our plan is to create some flexibility there. And teachers having the flexibility on those non-student grading days to work from home. Those aren't a day that we gather faculty typically. Those are left for staff development days and other parts of the day. And so we're going to, make our way into that and see how that works for our teachers and how that works at our buildings. And then finally, as you already know, elementary assessment days were a topic of our work. Moving forward with kindergarten and first grade this fall, really looking at the feedback both from teachers as well as our parents and our community, and then making some adjustments as needed to be able to move that to a kindergarten through 5th grade model the following year. So super excited about the work that's happened over the 2 years and the progress that we're making as a district.
And I think just before we open up for questions, we are thinking a lot about what's ahead. You know, what are the possibilities? How do we, and we've alluded to it earlier, how do we come up with some of those big wins where we're looking at attracting teachers, for example, where we're looking at what's the impact of Eastern Carver County schools on educational reform? How might this play a part in our larger piece of work with personalized learning? So I think the possibilities right now are really only limited by our ability to ask the question. We've created the conditions. We've got some of those small wins, and so we're in a good place. And right now, I guess we'd open it up if you have any questions for us.
Board members, questions?
I'll start it out. First of all, from a board seat, it is really refreshing to see the collaboration between our administration and our teachers coming together, not necessarily to get a contract done, but really to do what's best for kids. And it's just great to see. I love hearing about the work that you guys are doing. I'm I guess interested, Chris, from your perspective, you've talked about kind of some of the little wins so far and then some of the possibilities. What's the feedback that you're getting from your colleagues?
I think it's quite favorable. I think, quite honestly, we'd all like big wins. But I think that as our colleagues think about the conditions that we have here, there's a lot of gratitude for that. I think that one of the questions that I hear a lot is, how do we create a sustainable work life? And that's not really easy, to master in our culture and our expectations. And I could talk a lot more about that. But I think there's hope, and there is a patience that, well, this is fabulous, the things that we've done. And how do you see that? Again, similar questions. Where's this going to lead?
Well, I just want to, again, thank you guys and keep up the great work. Keep pressing forward and working together. So, thanks.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, this is really exciting to see this, and we talked about this during negotiations, and it's fun to kind of start seeing the collaboration and hearing from teachers on what we can do. You do kind of keep talking about big wins. So, what would that be?
Yeah, I think one, and again, it's a conversation. I don't have a timeline, so I don't want to make anybody nervous. One of the things we'd like to talk about is what is prep time?
Right.
And if we do have prep time, what are all the definitions and manifestations that we use now and again, I think this is beyond, Eastern Carver County Schools. This is a national question. But if we have initiatives from the state and the feds, and the only place we can shoehorn that training in is prep time, then is that prep time? And we also think about the hours that we all know teachers spend at night. Mm-hmm. Well, is that, how is that thought about? And so could we ever have a situation where the teacher had the autonomy to say, I've got 3 hours of work tonight. I'm going to try to do an office visit for a child, a doctor's visit during the day. Is that, I'm not in class, I'm not with students. Is that something we could ever consider? So that would be we'd be professionalizing the way we think about that time. And again, it's back to that, seat time idea that we've talked about.
Yeah, and I'm a huge proponent to, back in the day, 20 years ago when we started looking at alternative work arrangements or flexible work arrangements, and I work in a very flexible world. But I don't have a classroom of kids that I'm waiting on. And so it's a much more complicated topic, for sure. It's exciting to see some of these pieces, especially with conferences, because conferences are very different from elementary to high school. And I drag my kids to the conferences in high school, and love that time and conversation, but it is more of a challenge, and you see a lot of those teachers, that time isn't used, both in the middle school and the high school. And it begs the question, is that valuable time? So I'm glad to see this. Love the idea of, grading days and being able to work remotely. Again, I speak from experience when I said when you have a deliverable, when working from home, you have a deliverable, you get it done, regardless of whether you're driving into the office or you're working from home. But yeah, these are kind of limited things based upon the nature of the work. So this is an exciting place to start, and it's exciting that we're seeing the start of this conversation, and it is fun to think about kind of the possibilities going forward. And let's just keep talking.
Other questions, comments?
It would seem like there's a need here to manage expectations as well, in that we're talking about a lot of the positives and changing the workday, et cetera, but that we've also got a staff that's been going through a lot of change in the last 5 years, who are going to see this as, now what? So I think you have to temper it a little bit, the exuberance of these wonderful ideas with, okay, what's the bottom line here? What does that really mean for me as a teacher? And in terms of what I've got my expectations and you've got my expectations, and where are we going with this? Well, I'll stop at that point. Let you speak.
So where are we going with this? Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, and are you taking into consideration managing the expectation a little bit so that we don't get so excited about what we could be doing 5 years from now, instead of, as you're suggesting, taking it step by step?
No, it's a great point, Fred. And I think, as we present maybe some of the pieces that are left out, that we really are not creating and you're not suggesting, but this wouldn't be a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So we're not going to agree this is how conferences are going to work, and then we do have to agree by building, and we would like to agree so that a family wouldn't have, they've got 4 kids, they've got 4 different experiences. But we really do want to create flexibility as opposed to a new model that will now be coercive. And that's kind of the thinking here. So I don't know. I think that, the district applied to the state for a waiver on the constraints of the instructional day. And that's really, I think, exciting. Now, I'm a teacher nobody has, because start times have changed. But imagine that I'm a teacher that 20 years has had the same start time and the same end time, and life works. And I'm really going to be frustrated or threatened. I think what we're talking about right now is what would it look like if people had choices, as opposed to this has to be this model. And so I think that's the beauty of this is we're not kind of in an old school, here's the new model, and this is what we're going to do, and hope you're happy. That there are a lot of conversations and a lot of feedback, and then freedom to make some choices.
I think, Fred, also, I would just say that the focus right now is what are the more of the barriers, or what are the things that we've been doing for all these years that maybe we don't need to keep doing. And that's coming from teachers as opposed to, teaching and learning. We decide, well, let's mess with conferences, or let's mess with, grading days. The reality is, this year, just on a whim, the two of our bigger snow days were on grading days. And so as you have that conversation, we needed grading days because we had these 4-layer carbon copy that you got to push super hard at the beginning of the year in order to get all the way through the paper, and they had to be in a locked room. We don't have that anymore. So the reality is, as long as the grades are entered and ready to go, whether you're physically there or not really isn't that important anymore. It was 20 years ago. It's not today. So how do we start having those conversations about just opening the door to doing some things a little bit differently? And there are times where we say, maybe we're not ready for that yet this year, or let's ease into that. And so that's where some of these haven't necessarily been as big of wins maybe as we'd hoped, but they are some small victories that I think will continue the momentum. But it isn't about identifying more things to do. How do we make the things we're doing more manageable and make sense a little bit more? But I agree with Chris too. I think the down the road, so we're still held to the, obviously the law and some of the state requirements, and so that kind of keeps you in a certain box, so to speak, and we can only get so creative within that. If we get into that innovation zone application, it would give us an opportunity to at least start really talking about doing something different. Not that we would, but how could we at least start having that conversation? And this is a great vehicle to have those discussions.
That's very helpful. Do you anticipate somewhere down the line in terms of this working out these programs involving the opinions of the community? Parents who have got the 4 kids in 4 different levels, or what's working for them and what isn't working for them, so we can get some real practical application to helping the kids too.
I think that's been a critical part of the conversation around conferences and what's meaningful to the parent, to the learner, and to the teacher. And that does look different at different levels. At the elementary, there's a strong desire by parents to still come in and sit down one-on-one with the teacher for 20 minutes and have that conversation. And a lot of it's just about their growth and development generally. How do we make that same meaningful experience at the middle level, at the high school level, taking into account some of the changes in the learner, in their ability to take more ownership or have more agency for their learning, and how does that evolve? And this is just a starting point. We expect that we'll continue to make progress, including our parents in the conversation.
Because if you can turn the dynamic around, where elementary, everybody wants to know how their 3rd grader's doing, but at the secondary level, particularly high school, the parents that you talk to consistently at conferences are the ones whose students are doing very well. And that's why they're doing very well, because of that involvement. If you can twist it to find out what's going to get those other parents who aren't as involved more into the program, into the system.
And part of the conversation also, as I looked back through our notes from this year, was really around, what do parents need from the school to support their learner? And sometimes that's, having some sessions around a topic, whether they come together, whether they come alone, making things accessible that they can watch on their own time. How do we engage parents in what they need and want to know about their learner and their learner's experience?
Although I will say some of my favorite conferences have been when I felt like I was a third wheel between my child and my child's teacher. And where they came in and had questions, and and they had this beautiful conversation, and I just sat there like, because they took over. And that's a beautiful thing too. And that obviously doesn't happen in 1st grade, but that does happen as time goes on. So,
and we can start scaffolding them to have that conversation.
And it does happen, right? And so it's like, I'd hate to, even though there's a lot of those teachers that sit around during those secondary secondary conferences. Boy, those have been some of my favorite conferences.
And just to respond to both of you, if we remember that personalized learning is building the ownership for the learner, we're also constantly talking about, are we building ownership for the teachers? And now, to your point, Fred, are we building ownership in the community? Because that's really what we're doing. We're serving the community. And so that we have three frames that we look at our teacher work through. One is the industrial union, and you all know that, and you have lots of opinions about it. The middle, or the second frame, is the professional union, and that's what you're referring to, Fred, with the professionalism and increasing that. And the third frame is the social justice piece, and that is really, does the community have a voice? Is the community a partner? Does the community own our educational system? And I think, historically, that's depended on the community. And we're really kind of saying that is our community, and how do we live into that?
So I have a question, or are we done? My question kind of just relates to the overall process of this. Is there goals for... more so, this is kind of relating to the elementary assessment days. We as a board didn't really vote on these, and we were just kind of said this is what's going to happen. And I don't think that they're not valuable. I just think it's a lot to have for K through 5 to not start 2 days later. And it was just the discussion around that, and it was kind of just, this is how it is, it's going to be this way. Is there a process? Are we okay with the process that these get presented to us and that's just the way that it is and we don't necessarily vote on anything? Or is there things that we can just be abreast of to know if there's things for 2018-19 that we just know of, whether we vote or not? It's okay, but just the way that the assessment days came about was kind of, this is how it is.
That's kind of a two-part question there. Part of that question is to the board, and part of that is to us here. I think at least the part that involves us, that's part of the reason why we did K1, because, and going back to that community parent loop is, we can start small and get some feedback of how did it go and what would it look like and what were some of the challenges, so that we're not jumping right into that K5 and we have, chaos. It's not working out the way we want it to. So we have an opportunity to kind of study it in a smaller format. We already do that basically for kindergarten, so it's really just expanding it to first grade. We can get some more feedback, report back to you, and say, based on those, what we've seen, this is what we think we need to do moving forward. So there was no intent to do the whole thing at once, but we wanted to move that process out. I think in the past, you establish the board establishes the calendar, and we have a requirement to meet so many days, and using the flexibility within that, as long as we're hitting the required number of hours and days. And that's what we did with high school with assessment days. We didn't necessarily have a board vote on that. But again, that's a question back to the board. If that's something that you want to pursue, we can have that conversation too.
And I guess it's more of just what down the road, are we voting on this ever? This is just what's being laid out to us, and we will actually take in consideration what K1 is, how that works for first grade, and then assess for 2 through 5, or is 2 through 5 already kind of been decided that that's what we're going to do? I think it's just we're waiting to see how one works, right?
That was, again, part of that conversation was to assess what has gone well, do some survey, and also tie that K5 piece into the calendar conversation, which we'll get some input on as well. So,
well, and from my perspective, I mean, as a board, we're a governance body. We don't, I don't have a master's in education, and I don't, we're not to dive down and into that level of operational.
I mean, I think that...
we're a governance board.
Right. I mean, that's the distinction I was going to point to. It would be, there's a lot of things that we listen and we get reports on, but at the end of the day, the things we vote on are the things that are, policies. They're pursuant to policies, or they're the allocation of resources. Those are the things that we vote on, right? When it comes to programs and curriculum and and, you know, specific allocation of the educational mission, you know, to her point,
And we
right?
voted on the calendar.
Right.
of
And
it,
so, we- you know.
What school days would be happening.
Right.
And we changed, it was changed,
Right.
so.
So we can discuss the calendar, and other sort of resource allocation issues, but, I mean, if we, you know, again, I think right now, we need to defer to the people that we've hired and that they've subsequently hired, that are professionals, that this is what they do. And if we deem that that's not a good allocation of resource, then we have decisions to make.
I was just going to say to Josie's point, though, I think people are often very surprised to find out that we don't really have any direct control or say in kind of more of the things that impact the kids, because they think, well, I voted for you so you could be my voice to, you know, make sure that my kids are getting a good education. And we, in fact, don't really have any control over the education they receive other than from a budgetary standpoint. And so I would maybe suggest that at a future retreat, maybe we could talk about what our role is in the district, and if we feel like we should have more direct involvement in, I mean, like Lisa said, I mean, we aren't educational experts for the most part. I mean, Fred certainly was a teacher, so he would know more than we do. But at the same time, we are here representing our community.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think that would be a good conversation to have at some point to really evaluate what our role is, and if this, you know, if the current board is happy with that role, or if we need to look at changing it.
Well, but I think, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would also say that there are other ways that we as a board influence what happens outside of just voting. And I think my experience thus far being on the board is that administration has done a great job at listening to our feedback, even if it's not in a voting capacity, and taking those things and implementing them in various things and then bring it back to us with some of those changes. So I do think that there are ways outside of voting on every little thing that does come, and I'm not suggesting that that's what you were suggesting either, Josie, but I think that there are ways with our feedback that we give that we can influence the direction of the district as well.
Well, we just have to be careful, because the role of a school board is not, we just have to be really careful, because the role of a school board is based upon, it's more that we can't really decide, like, and, you know, we can't really just decide, hey, this is what we now want to, I mean, can we?
I think it's going to a whole nother level, though. That's not what I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm not
But
implying of this.
I understand, but I think Ron's point, I mean, I get your question. Ron's point is, I think, an extremely important one, right? There's our role in how we influence the district and its direction is not just through voting. Now, that's the most kind of direct and significant and tangible, but to Ron's point about other ways to influence, we are all, you know, we're elected representatives, and we have the ability to have conversations and dialogue with all of these people about what they're doing and how they go about their job. And then at the end of the day, you know, that should all be channeled into, you know, when we have actions to take, right? On the agenda, we have these actions with votes, and those should reflect that. And I know where Lisa's going to go. I mean, I think as a school board, certainly we could go much farther. But if you follow, if you read about boards and governance and their roles and responsibilities, what Lisa's saying is exactly right. Yep. You know, we could go farther than that, but we have to understand there will be very real consequences in this marketplace. People will, if we decide that we know better than him and her and her and him,
go somewhere else.
They will go someplace else. So
and that's
anyway,
where it's
that's
taken to a whole other level, because that's not what I was asking.
Yeah, I understand.
I was just asking about the calendar, and we had approved the calendar per se, and then it was changed now that the kids in K through 5 might be changing later. And so we did a 2-year approval of the calendar.
The current.
And this is what I'm just asking. I don't, You don't have to
Current
tell
approval,
me about
that's, it's a good question. The current approval is for this calendar year and for next year. So what Amy will be leading is the calendar committee that you'll make a final decision in November, or have something presented in October for the next 2 years after that, okay?
Right.
So when we present a calendar to you later this fall in October, we'll have gone through the K-1 assessment days, and
Yep.
we'll have been able to gather that feedback and made some decisions about what that, and that will be
Yes.
built into the calendar for the next 2 years, which you will be approving.
Right.
And so
And so we've approved up to 2018-19, is that correct?
you have approved 18.
And then the only thing that's changed was the first
Was
grade,
first grade.
really, right?
Right.
Okay, so this is what I'm asking, that's all I'm asking on how this,
Well, that's fine. No,
approval
but
of it.
Amy, but
I-
you know, that's fine. Amy's point in this discussion, though, is it does come up. People, you know, and that's
people
why.
are coming to me like, well, how come
Yeah,
K
and that's
through
why
five
that's
is
why
now-
you know, that's why
Yeah.
I understand that wasn't your point, but I think to what Amy said, and whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
it is it's a conversation that happens on more often than you'd think, because you know it's. You know, people understand what is governance, what is a board, how does a school district function, what is this organism, right, and how does it all work? Yeah, I have that conversation with people a lot because they think like, oh, you're on the school board, all right, you know, make stuff happen, right?
Well, and
And-
I'm sorry.
That's all.
If they've lived in the community long enough, they've seen school boards that did get involved. And it didn't work well. It didn't work well at all. We're 7 personalities who are incredibly meshed and in agreement with the important philosophies of where we want this district to be and where we want it to go. That might not be the case 6 months from now.
Right.
It may not be the case 10 years from now. So we've got to be sure we're very solid in what we want the philosophy of the board to be, so that the next generation can pick that up at that point. Beware of the changing of the board. Lisa will tell you, I haven't always got along with school boards, and that was a big
Is
part.
that why you're here today, Fred?
That is why he's here
No.
today.
It used to be more than it is now.
Oh, you wanted the budget report.
I wanted to get
That's
my
what you
fingers
wanted.
on that math.
Well, it was really the actuary report that he was.
But in all seriousness, boards change, and we have to be very set and make sure we know what our philosophy is to pass to the next generation of board members. And there can't be any doubt about how much our involvement should or shouldn't be. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I didn't, and I certainly wasn't saying that we should stage a coup and just like
No,
take
no,
over
no.
everything. I'm just saying that at a retreat, I think it would be good for us to talk through all of this just so we're comfortable with our role and how it works and what our impact is. I'm not saying we should, you know,
And what you say to the community when
tear
they ask
down.
that.
Yeah, exactly. I just think we just all need to be sure that we're comfortable.
Fire pile down there, Paul. So
anyway.
let
Yeah,
me back it up. Remember when I said you had really 2 questions? There was a
These guys
We're sorry.
hopefully we've answered the question from us, and I do think, you know, we'll have board elections here this fall, and every year in, you know, December when we do that board retreat, it's an opportunity to talk about board roles and responsibilities, and that's a great opportunity for us to all, you know, continually reconnect on what is your role as a board, what's my role as superintendent and as administration and teachers, so we can do that.
So,
Wow.
just to add one
Sorry that we
question,
hijacked your
the
presentation.
question for you guys was is there 2018 and 2019 things that you are working on, and so we can just maybe be aware of them ahead of time, maybe, and ask questions to you guys like how we do just in general, instead of like this last time, I think it was just put on us and this is what's going to happen, you're going to, you know, it's happening. So is there, like, this is done, right? Is there future things that, I mean,
I would say that really what pushed us to the very end of the year was the grading day conversation. So we don't have an agenda. Our agreement is to continue our conversations to make progress with taking away these structures that impede. But right now we don't have an agenda or a list of things. Yeah.
As that committee comes together in the fall, we'll set some priorities and we can make a point to share just what the topics that are on the table are, just so that you aren't feeling surprised
And I
going
will
forward.
tell you, there'll be one conversation for next year that I'll
throw into the mix, and part of that, in Minnesota now, you can have so many online learning days. And so if there is inclement weather and your district has a plan, you can call it a school day and have kids work from home. And there are many districts who are doing that now, but you have to have a plan in place. There's a lot of logistics and conversations, and that's a good place to have that conversation before we bring it back to you to say, here's what we're thinking, and that plan would have to be approved by MDE. So we couldn't even start doing that now if we wanted to, because we haven't had any of those conversations. And what's the vehicle to have that conversation? It's this kind of group. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Wow.
Sorry you stepped into that one, but thank
I
you
went to a whole
for your
different level.
work together, and really thank you for being centered on our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers for all of your work.
Thank you. Okay. That brings us to communications and information. 6.1, communications from the school board. We'll start over to my left. Mr. Meyer.
I have no report tonight.
Okay.
I have no report.
I just want to share a little feedback that I got regarding the Chaska High School graduation. I spoke to Mr. Beckler a few days later, and a family who had gone to several graduations before coming to Chaska High School's graduation said that they had been to 2 or 3 other ceremonies, and they felt that Chaska High School's was the best they had seen because it was very student-centered and it ran smoothly and it kept going. And so he asked me to pass that information along to you, and he was going to tell Mr. Principal Bach as well. But they did a nice job, and it definitely gets noticed by people. And then I also just want to mention, we did choose a new student representative for Chaska High School. She hadn't officially accepted it before our last meeting, but Lucy Browning will be joining us in September.
Awesome.
Yay.
Great.
I have no report.
I think we probably didn't talk to the same people, but I heard almost exactly the same reaction to graduations from folks who had been there for their grandchildren, but very positive.
I have no reports.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I had a number of people just from both schools just tell us how much they like, the services that we have, and from the venue to the organization to the flow. And I know they've creeped up a little bit longer than when they were used to be really rigid, trying to do it in an hour. But nobody complained about them running along. So everyone seemed very happy. So thanks to everyone, and I'm glad, Amy, great job on your remarks, and so glad you were able to have that moment with your daughter. And so with that, we'll turn it over to 6.2, communications from our superintendent.
No report tonight.
Excellent. So we will move on to item 7.0, which is closed meeting. So we will be going into a closed session for Superintendent Christopher's evaluation pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, subdivision 3A. So with that, I need a motion to go into closed session.
So
Do I
moved.
have a motion? Second. Anderson and Russ. Great. A voice vote. All in favor of moving into closed session, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. So we will now take a short recess and go into closed meeting. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.